Aeroplane over the Sea, a symbolic analysis. This album has a deep and complex symbolism which have contributed to its strange and uncanny appeal. Here I intend to offer my own interpretation of these symbols. My research is informed by a personal intellectual interest in myth and the human spirit. I have read somewhat into the history and context of the album, but my research is by far insufficient for a true complete picture. There are more complete commentaries on the history of the band and Jeff found elsewhere. My primary interest is understanding the symbols presented here. I have favoured the ideas of Jung in this analysis and they offer by far the greatest depth of inquiry. This is a reasonably original work of art that sets itself apart in its commitment to surrealism and the mythic nature of the internal symbolic struggle presented here. Analysis of this work leads one to an interesting understanding of an oft neglected and misunderstood part of the human spirit, and the album offers itself as a cry to a renewed connection with the divine. The album's strength is derived from two great sources: the spectacular funky indie rock sound, best explored by more musically minded people, and the absurdly surreal and powerful imagery that transfixes fans of the album. This imagery, and its architecture, within the album is key to understanding the work and its significance. The often surreal, graphic, and sexual imagery invoked by Mangam's lyrics are mostly taken from Jeff's dreams and waking daydreams. This is what sets the album apart from the rest of these indie rockers. The album is interspersed with the symbolic dream images of an indie rocker, and of course the scene that relates to it. Symbols are above language, and they represent things and concepts, deeper indicators of a universal truth. Thus, Aeroplane over the Sea can be approached from a Jungian perspective, and seen as both a dream journal of Mangum or as a symbolic story and fable that describes an individual's relationship with love, loss, the world, and divinity. The one thing that makes Mangum seemingly a genius lyricist is his ability to say so much in such vague terms, leaving us to fill in the blanks with our own life experiences and conjectures. The purity of the dream symbols laid bare in this music constellates archetypes within all of us. This is what draws us in. This is what we relate to. Not what he says, but what he doesn't explain. He speaks in symbols. Not a language here, but something deeper, something that causes an upwelling within ourselves. King of Carrot Flowers, Part 1. An incredible piece of work that explores the sexual awakening of the protagonist, in a rare yet refined manner, free from late 20th century awkwardness and fear, instead supplanted with the true joy of discovering one of the most sacred and beautiful parts of the human experience. It contrasts a young, awakening romantic relationship upon the backdrop of absent and violent parents, with the lovers finding solace in their union despite the turbulence of life. The ultimate work of human love. Not a simple, hedonistic love, no, a love that weathers the chaos of life. Still, it is a young and pure love, and the lovers who find solace in each other's bodies are subject to the trials of life. Yet that is not raised in the song. It doesn't matter now. What matters is their union. It opens with the evocation of the King of Carrot Flowers, a playful, nostalgic title of early to mid-century imagery evoked throughout the album. Symbolically, the nostalgia signifies a need to look into the past for wholeness. This is followed with an invocation of symbols found in the biblical book of Genesis. And how you built a tower tumbling through the trees, referencing the Tower of Babel, followed by, with holy rattlesnakes that fell all around your feet. Clear reference to the serpent in the tree in the Garden of Eden. While this song appears to be addressed to Mangum's lover, the King of Carrot Flowers is presumably male. Floral imagery is used within the work to invoke and symbolize purity, as it does here, symbolizing the purity of the relationship between the protagonist and his lover. There lies an interesting union in the connection of the Tower of Babel and the fall from Eden. Both represent humanity trespassing on the divine in an attempt to reach it. This can be seen as a parallel to young love's divinity in the mind and the cruel reality. the fall that surrounds such love and ends it. Again, the Genesis imagery is pertinent in this song, with Mangum's Eve being his first lover, his first woman. From a Jungian perspective, the symbolic identification of the lover with Eve raises eyebrows, especially considering the youthful nature of the sexuality present in the song. Eve is the first symbolic stage of the anima, the feeling part of the psyche within a man, a theme that recurs throughout Mangum's dream symbol story of the album, an element that the album revolves around. Mangum's poetry shines through in the lines, "This is the room one afternoon I knew I could love you, and from above you how I sank into your soul." Through this, a beautiful image of the soulful, whole nature of love is painted, and the stage is set for the exploration of love, reality, and divinity in the rest of the album. King of Carrot Flowers, Parts 2 and 3. One of the most bizarre tracks of this album is Part 2 of this song. It takes the form of a gospel hymn, undoubtedly influenced by the American Protestant tradition of Jesus worship. This perhaps indicates the dead and dying religious initiation that seems mundane or meaningless due to the slow drawl of the song. The divine has lost its divinity somewhat, but it is still sung. There is a need for the protagonist to connect with the divine he knows, expressing a divinity in all things, a key theme of the album. This quickly merges, and Jesus is abandoned for a bizarre verse that perhaps recurs the Buddhist-like origins of Christianity, with the contemplation of the impermanence of the world, with lyrics referencing dissolution and "the world goes on and on." Part 2, while at first glance is a rather strange and short track, but is far from devoid of meaning. The meaning within it is cryptic and mysterious, a significant allure of the album, as told through its symbolic imagery. While modern thought celebrates clarity, the real world is far from clear, and if we are no students of the chaotic and strange, are we not going to be consumed by it? I interpret this track to be a reinforcing of the mystery divine, introducing the symbol of a faint divine light in all things, not simply the sexual, creative essence explored in Part 1. This introduces ideas and symbolic notions championed in theologies all around the world, from the writings of Ignatius of Loyola to animistic traditions in Siberia. Part 1 ends with the line, "the day we are awaiting," before launching into a trumpeting end and a bridge into the next track. This line, however, is hinting at the eternal longing and at the potential for renewal and rebirth following inevitable demise, an eternal theme of divine belief, the world over. Part 3 speeds up greatly, and is broadly an anthem to youthful spirit and clumsiness, as well as youthful soul-searching. Ultimately, it is a song of rebirth, reborn with essential divinity, longed for previously. It centers around the motif of swimming in surf, with the refrain, "Up and over we go, through the wave and undertow." Swimming in surf is hard work, and initially seems chaotic and awkward, much like early life, when you haven't learned how it moves. However, waves and surf can be tamed with time, no matter how chaotic they are. And in the song, this is hoped for. See, "and I will float until I will know how to swim." This advancement from a lower to a higher state of knowledge that will aid in the protagonist's life. The next line offers a symbol with several interpretations, a rhyme of, "inside my mother in a garbage bin." This alludes to both the myth of rebirth shown throughout this track and on the possible futility and mortality of human life through the divinity-loaded concept of a mother in an oh-so-earthly and filthy garbage bin. Functionally, the song affirms life through many symbols such as spitting till one speaks and spitting snow. Though the only other reference to snow in this album is a sexual one in the track Communist Daughter. This may be a playful symbol of a snowball fight, a part of the youthful archetypes found in the Western cultural consciousness. Magnum reported carnival imagery in his dreams, another symbol of youth in the West. This part of the song ends with more nostalgic imagery and a longing for the protagonist to be proclaimed. This is further indicative of the track's youthful theme, with such a longing for recognition common in youth. The next verse starts the same as the others, through an emotional outburst with somewhat random lyrics when performed. This outburst can be interpreted as being a piece of self-expression and individuality, a key theme of the track. In the studio album, as recorded, 2 lines are of particular interest. "I will shout until they know what I mean," clearly shows a rebellious and outspoken youth, indicative of Mangum's desire to perform. The symbol of dogs are evoked once again in this track, but this time in the marriage of a dead dog rather than the dissolution of a dog. This could represent the animalistic side of the psyche, and its dissolution, and then dead marriage, an oxymoron. Though dogs can symbolize many things, even people. The final line of note is that of the synthetic flying machine. Considering the album is titled Aeroplane Over the Sea, there is significance in this. The sky and flight / aircraft can be taken as a symbol of God or the eternal, as seen in the next eponymous track, and in the illusions of sheltering from Allied air raids in the narrative of Anne Frank, as explored in the middle of the album. This line also paints the sound, nostalgic feel, and color of the album with its mid-century pastel fuzz tone. Were this whole album analyzed as a dream by a Jungian, the music and its tone is surely the emotion associated with the dream. The Aeroplane Over the Sea. The well-placed title track of the album begins with beautiful guitar strumming, evoking an almost sunny, halcyon, yet present mood, reminiscent of the seaside holiday presented on the cover art. What follows is a beautiful anthem to existentialism and remains a fitting title track to this deep album. The first verse extols the lover of Jeff, sometimes identified with Anne Frank, though this appears to be more of a symbolic link through Mangum's dreams of a Frank-like girl. The lyrics in the song paint a beautiful relationship, though brief and potentially only in dreams, yet still pure and wholly affirming of life. Beautiful imagery and near-on poetic genius is present throughout the track, with the song conjuring a deep love, which also accepts the absurdity of life and its beauty. The track shares themes with The King of Carrot Flowers Part 1, that being of a holy love, though this love is more mature and steeped more in a holistic embrace of reality, rather than the deep sexual charge of the first part of Carrot Flowers. Eve has transmuted towards Sophia, a wise and equal companion in the Jungian sense. After the classic rhymes of space and place and the imagery of circling around the sun is invoked. This is a reference to the often cosmic sense of belonging that is felt when one is deeply infatuated with someone, as it is as if one has found their true purpose, the love of someone else who loves them too. Then Mangum bittersweetly laments how such a dream can disappear in the blink of an eye. Yet it still can feel so soft and sweet. He wishes to hold this dream close. This can be interpreted on many levels, from the literal dream to an allegory for life as a whole. But this versatility hints at the symbolic value of this verse. Ultimately, this verse symbolizes the beautiful experience of that life and love really are. This is a symbolic affirmation of existence. The verse which follows continues in this affirmation, even in death, with the brilliant line, "And one day we will die, and our ashes will fly from the aeroplane over the sea." This acceptance of death rings out while the music remains upbeat and life-affirming, showing the defiance and affirmation of experience. The symbol of the aeroplane over the sea is a curious one. The thematic language of Mangum's dreams, and by extension Neutral Milk Hotel, is somewhat pre-1990s, with its references to radio plays, copper wire, and the carnival nature of the music. In Western and American society in the late 20th century, the Second World War is elevated to a mythical significance. In its aftermath, the myth that was written is that of a just war, with the Allies saving Europe from the scourge of the National Socialists. This myth, regardless of its truth, gave a moral structure to Western society, which Mangum finds himself in. As such, it may then be not surprising that his dream images are derived from this mythical time, as they come from the moral, mythical superstructure of society, much like how an ancient Greek may dream of Hermes coming to them with a message. The particular story which affected Jeff was that of Anne Frank, a young girl forced to hide and eventually killed by the SS. In this story, airplanes were the Allied bombers which came from over the sea to bomb the German war machine. Aircraft were these intangible angels, recognized by sound and fear, bringing both destruction and hope. As the album explores divinity in its multitude of sources, this divine symbol has its position high in the pantheon. Over the Sea conjures several different interpretations. Returning to the Genesis imagery, the sea can be seen as the chaotic waters, with the airplane representing some sort of divine refuge for it. Alternately, given the sunny theme of the track and the cover art, the image of an airplane over the sea could be seen in its seaside holiday notion, a strange visitor and curiosity from the world beyond, but still part of us. The imagery of ashes flying from the airplane, returning to the waters, shows a process of reincarnation or recurrence as hinted at later in the album. This joyous acceptance of mortality, an eternally feared dragon of humanity, is one of the key exaltations and affirmations of life in the track. If we can accept life, even in death, what do we have to fear? This acceptance makes way for brilliantly sunny emotions in the lines of, "For now we are young, let us lay in the sun and count every beautiful thing we can see, love to be." This neon poetic genius delivers a brilliant affirmation of life and youth, while also having consciously accepted mortality. While this song is a less symbolically or thematically complex, it is deeply powerful in the emotional and spiritual sense, perhaps as much as any other of the deep tracks of the album. The emotive and beautiful poetry continues into the third verse, with several interpretations arising. Also, with the references to the experiences of Frank, who remains an important element of the symbols of this song. The lover appears to be a symbolic creation in Mangum's dreams, heavily influenced by Mangum's lament of the death of Frank, but also other features. In interviews, this appears to be Mangum's ideal woman. In a Jungian sense, she can be seen as an expression and projection of his anima. The song then references Anna almost directly and appears to draw link between her ghost and this love. Following further imagery that needs to be heard to be understood, the fourth verse offers an apparent hope of a union between Jeff and Anne in the afterlife, though on a deeper level, the metaphor of heaven could be interpreted as a state to be made of earth, with laughing ecstasy, with perhaps one of the most powerful lines of the album, with a solid musical fusion accompanying. Can't believe how strange it is to be anything at all. This acceptance and ecstatic affirmation of life is a key message of the song. The life of the protagonist reaches a peak here, having loved, contemplated the divine, and now loved maturely, embracing life. The four verses and the bridge form a symbolic self, a sealed mandala of the meaning, a message full of the potent power for joyous life. Two-headed boy. A dark day has dawned with this song. We are now to be tested and are to feel the emotions of grief, horror, and regret. The arc of the album now darkens. This track alludes to Frank's isolation, to paint the picture of the character that Mangum wishes to save. Jeff paints himself as the two-headed boy, a creature with dual spirit. The boy is characterized as floating in a glass jar, as if he is an oddity to be studied by science. This indicates the personal sentiment of otherness and general weirdness to be expected for an indie rocker. This character later becomes tinted with shame regarding the confluence of its sexuality and supposed good nature. The girl is then introduced, tapping on the jar, conjuring an image of boredom and confinement, referencing Frank's time in the annex. This further characterizes the character of the girl as not being where she would fare best. Mangum then cries out, "I am listening to hear where you are." Here he longs to be connected with his lover, who is confined, as he is too. The next verse, rich in imagery, focuses on the boy dancing and expressing his emotion, wearing his very best shoes. An image of a record needle singing on his heart is painted, showing the joy comes deep, despite the melancholy and darker nature of this song. The imagery in this verse is an example of the lyric visual language that is so emotionally powerful yet hard to decrypt, even serving its meaning more in the nostalgic, joyous, and sepia feelings which it conjures. Signals that sound in the dark begins the radio reference, which appears throughout the track. This and other tracks have layered meanings throughout, and the radio symbol is one significant example of this. In Frank's journal, an inspiration for the album, radios were beacons of hope. Listening to the BBC World Service for news and of the progress of the war, radios in the album are used to symbolize Jeff's connection with the girl and the hope for a better life together. The signals sounding in the dark, therefore, can be seen to emotionally symbolize this relationship. This song has some of the most intense and delicate imagery of close intimacy in the album, often focusing on fine and minute details that are often the highlights of a truly soulful, intimate experience. Following a poetically beautiful link, the chorus begins, which is one of the highlights of the intimate imagery. With excellent musical alchemy, the lovers take off their clothes, and he places his fingers through the notches in her spine. Then something strange happens. When all is breaking, everything that you could keep inside rings out. Some very mysterious lyrics indeed. This appears to refer both to an orgasmic climax and collapsing out of stress. This double meaning links the intensity and surrender of an orgasm with the image of collapsing from exhaustion. Both of these are intense experiences and elements of life, which Mangum tries to show here, and the connection between the two. Perhaps this indicates the value and intensity of these experiences. After this climax, the song bends to a sad tone, with Jeff lamenting how his lover's eyes no longer move and now lay there in their climb, as if the lover has died in that climactic moment. A possible interpretation is that these lyrics paint a picture of the significant instances in time. The pure, creative, and biological power of an orgasm is contrasted with the death in human conditions, alluding to the death of Frank in a camp, one of the inspirations of this album. These moments are characterized as moments of pure energy of spirit, moments that change the course of all of our lives. From this we may learn that sometimes the slow game of life becomes very fast and condensed almost into a singularity of spirit, from which effects are created and may reverberate across the world. This singularity metaphor has a particular value as in a black hole, a gravitational singularity. The laws of physics appear to break down, much how in a sexual encounter the laws which govern life do much the same, and in climax the laws and how pleasure behaves seem to fall away in a golden sense light. Similarly, in exhaustion and illness, similar effects also happen. The next verse paints images of the two-headed boy and his lover, first placing the boy with pulleys and weights, symbolic of movement and machinery. Then the beautiful image of the boy is painted of him and his lover with reference to a radio play and the eternal mystical light of the moon on the girl's face. Then imagery of sparkling silver speakers rings out, a deification of the radio, both for the Frank narrative and the sacred communication narrative. The song then returns to the double meaning climax image at the end of this verse, with the line, made for his lover, who is floating and choking with her hands across her face, a reference to both an intense sexual encounter and dying of illness, bringing forth that symbol of nucleic, intense creation. Here, the chorus repeats, further reinforcing this idea. The final verse slows down and is almost addressed to the two-headed boy, saying that he need not grieve the loss of his lover, followed by symbolic images of gold, silver sleeves, and Christmas trees in the snow. These are complex symbols, but offer some resolution. The reference to gold could be in its alchemical sense, a transmutation from a base metal, something bad and lame, to gold, a pure and divine substance. As with all symbols, they conjure a personal interpretation. This image can also be interpreted to mean that the world the boy needs is a precious and delicate thing. The Christmas trees in the snow lyric finds itself in the dark of winter, a time of death but which will lead to symbolic rebirth in the spring. After all, Christmas's pagan roots are a celebration of rebirth, a celebration for the dark of winter and for the hope of spring. Perhaps what the boy needs is precious things left behind in the winter, but with the promise of rebirth. Then the perspective shifts and the song darkens as it paints a picture of the girl's death. The boy leaves her alone, watching the cold snow spiraling, and there the girl lets go. A final instant, but this time without the dual meaning. The song meditates on the duality throughout its two climaxes, much like its titular character of the two-headed boy. By contrasting the sexual with physical death, it paints a picture of the potency and the duality between the two. The two-headed boy, tragic lover of the girl, finds what he needs, something beautiful, but something dead and dying, but capable of rebirth in different form. Fool. The album contains two instrumental tracks. They serve to break the album into somewhat distinct sections, but are primarily there to serve the sound landscape of the album. The music serves as a pastel fairground tone from the collective memory of old Europe, which provides the backdrop for the symbols and the story that Jeff must tell. Of symbolic curiosity is the title, The Fool, which serves as a reference to tarot. The fool in tarot is typically symbolic of the protagonist, the boy in this story, who makes his way through life, but is ultimately capable of folly, the obsession with a dead girl. The song ends with heavenly chimes, almost to remind the listener of the divine in all, especially fools. The Anne storyline reaches its proudest moment here. Breaking out with a powerful indie rock song, Mangum sings out with the line, "The only girl I ever loved." He then proceeds with powerful imagery of Frank being born with roses in her eyes, symbolic of both his love for her and the deep mysticism of the rose. More esoteric symbologies of the rose point out how the rose is associated with the heart. Returning to Genesis imagery, Eve was born out of the rib of Adam, from near the heart, leaving him vulnerable to her sway, a symbol that many men identify with today. And Jeff can be heard lamenting the death of his beloved throughout the track. Another more pertinent image is that of the rose having thorns along the base. Beauty has a duality to it. This song explores the concept. Then Frank is identified as having died in 1945, just before the liberation of Auschwitz. This is expressed through top-notch poetry. Then the song declares, now she's a little boy in Spain, playing pianos filled with flames. Apart from the awesome energy coming off this verse like a pillar of flame, the burning piano's significance is that it serves as a symbol for dynamic life force carrying on in a reincarnated form, showing how her spirit never dies. Piano burning is a tradition started in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War to commemorate fallen flight crew. This links in with the aeroplane symbol being of a divine and spirit, embodied machine, specifically fallen flight crew from the Royal Air Force, the Deadly Angels, the bringers of the promise of freedom for Frank. The next line, on empty rings around the sun, recurs with another one of Mangum's dream symbols. Rings are like an Ouroboros. They represent continuity and recurrence, and in a more literal style, they represent fidelity and love, known of wedding rings. However, in this image, the rings are empty. Frank has passed, and her divinity which graced the world is gone, while her spirit lives on. Then Jeff laments existentially, a la Aeroplane over the sea, that we must now pick up the pieces of the life they loved, enough to carry on. A link to the album's theme of existentialism. These lines also reference the psyche with the need to keep ourselves at least enough to carry on, representing a need to preserve individuality in the face of adversity. Then the track transports the listener to a post-death fairground, with Jeff and Anne riding a circus wheel, either the romantic illusion of a Ferris wheel or some other more abstract dream image with circle symbolism. Here the brother character is introduced. One of Jeff's friend's brothers committed suicide, and throughout the second half of the album, this character is referred to. The lovers being with the dark brother wrapped in white, a reference to death, could be seen as some sort of dream afterlife scenario. For Jeff, this represents the literal conclusion of his union with Anne, only possible in the afterlife. The brother then admits the value of life, but the beautiful imagery of a comet's flame taking away, reinforcing the permanence of death. The brother gives Jeff a message. He prefers observing the earth from the afterlife, but he didn't mean to hurt those who loved him when he died. People with severe depression often describe how they would rather come back as an observer. The depression complex, one of the sickest and vile demons that exist, has a significant architecture around responsibility and its perceived ills. The suicide of the brother is alluded to with imagery of ringing sparks and bullets flying. Then the empty ring symbol returns in reference to the grief of the brother's death, the wholeness that has been destroyed by suicide. The chorus returns, bringing that existentialist message back to the center and preparing us for the final verse. This verse meditates on the sanctity and divinity of family, returning to the carrot flower world once more, with rich imagery of empty beds, though filled with story. Finally, Jeff returns to the dark side of beauty and sanctity that he has been exploring, lamenting how the world seems not to care of the death of his family through the imagery of faces filled with flies, and finally retorts with saying how he'd want to keep white roses in their eyes, a symbol of both love and purity. The white rose was also a symbol for a short-lived resistance movement in the Nazi Empire, quashed by the Gestapo. Another symbol of hope for Frank to survive the war. Jeff's dream. Communist Daughter, one of the shorter and less lyrical tracks of the album, though in no way less symbolically rich. This song is a meditation on femininity, its sometimes divine, sometimes physical nature, a key part of the album. This song offers perhaps the purest, symbolic synthesis of this theme represented by this girl figure throughout. In this song, this anima takes the form not of Anne Frank, or Jeff's unnamed lover, but as the communist daughter, the idealized feminine. A highly simplified but symbolically relevant characterization of women is as those who speak for the voiceless, they who cannot defend themselves. This caring for others leads to ideologies such as communism being attractive to the caring feminine, and also symbolic for the feminine dream image to possess. Her proclivity for care is highlighted by the ideology. In the Second World War context, in fascist Germany, communists were seen as enemies of the state and therefore subhuman, returning us to the feminine under threat idea, explored in songs throughout the album. This character's divinity is then highlighted with an image of her standing on a sea of seaweed-filled water. Here she performs a miracle, but symbols are still present. Seaweed here can be seen to represent the depths of chaos and mystery. Here, the seaweed is the Taoist yin, another symbol of the divine feminine, the chaotic depths. Above her, the peaks of society are stained with semen. This girl is within the patriarchy and is not atop those mountains. These lines meditate both male excess in a patriarchy and the place of feminine in such a structure. Then the imagery of coca leaves is invoked. This has two symbolic notions. Coca leaves are a stimulating drug from which cocaine is made. This stimulation may be a reference to the stimulation and later masturbation scene. A second meaning is found how communists in the 1990s were in conflict with the cartel in South America who relied on coca for their business, and not fascists as they were in the 40s. Following this are a series of surreal dream images of cars falling and bridges bending. Symbolically, they can be seen as a sexual metaphor of penetration, while linking into the time theme of the album, night bombing in the Second World War. This symbol is supported by the imagery of the girl's fist moving over her genitals. The next lyrics lead the charge when it comes to the song's meaning. Bends towards the self, the soothing, proves that she must still exist, showing how her body bends towards itself both physically and metaphorically, both realizing her own existence and soothing her. In modern Western culture, masturbation is characterized as degenerate and for the sexless. But this song characterizes this universal practice in a far better and whole light. The next lines are cryptic but beautifully revealing, where through masturbation, the girl proves that she must still exist, showing again the connection to the self through the erotic, especially that this eros is self-inflicted. This eros is further invoked through such imagery through the following line. She moves herself about her fist, an example of the raw, powerful, and erotic imagery dreamed by Jeff. This track, when analysed from the dream perspective, could be interpreted as an expression of the Eve anima, but the feeling function as being a feeling duty critical to the individual. In the broader context of the album, this track serves as a close meditation in femininity and its subtleties in erotic feeling, much like how the title track meditates on existence. This is not an outwardly dark track, but it is certainly not a divine parade. It has the color of lived life, yet it connects with the divine feminine and her eros throughout the symbolic imagery it calls its own. The track ends with wonderful Magnumian meandering and humming, which has been compared to Hasidic traditions of music, a possible connection with a Jewish theme present throughout the album. O Comely. The longest song in the album, O Comely, is also one of the more uncharacteristic tracks. It comes in three parts. The first, a diatribe towards a lover, who Jeff deems hollow, a lament for Anne, and finally, an arcane but deeply symbolic verse centered on the Magnumian dream image of Goldali, a Siamese twin sister. The lover's diatribe forms the first part of the song. The girl, who is a composite character referencing both the American trailer park girl archetype, the daddy issues girl, and some possible references to Anne. This appears to be some sort of dream image pastiche, possibly inspired by a waking relationship Jeff left. He addresses the girl, likely not the same as in Carrot Flowers, Aeroplane Over the Sea, or 45, as comely, an archaic and crude sexual compliment for a woman. After a lengthy, well-colored, melancholic introduction, Jeff begins by affirming his union with his lover through the line, I will be with you when you lose your breath, a reference to both the physicality of an orgasm and how it is a moment of symbolic death and rebirth. A new chapter of the relationship begins with it, possibly even parenthood. Jeff then accuses his lover of chasing a memory of a lesbian relationship through the lines, a terrible scene that was doing her thing on your chest. This image of a lesbian relationship is associated with negative imagery both describing Jeff's jealousy and his denunciation of hollow sex. This also serves as an allusion to Anne's journal, where she expresses a homosexual desire and even asked her friend if she could touch her breast. Jeff continues to symbolically paint this picture, both through the melancholy music and the lyrics. Returning to the orgasm motif in 45, Jeff asserts that this girl is enamored in hollow love, accusing her of seeking sexual encounters to chase almost forgotten memories. Jeff then goes on to say how this isn't pretty or life-giving as the girl believes, with her being drunk on your automy. Through this line, Jeff stares through the rose-tinted, ephemeral glasses of a fast and hollow lover to deliver his thesis. He needs a whole and special love, a love that thrives despite the chaos of the world. The symbol of Anne serves to reinforce this idea, as she is an extreme archetype of the whole, lovable individual Jeff read in her diary, fostering a deep connection and gnosis with her, his longed-for whole love. The diatribe continues through strong narrative imagery, with the second verse breaking out with another double meaning of the girl's friend letting her blow, both a denunciation of her hollow ways and highlighting how bad friends can keep someone in a small and terrible place. Of note is the earlier line of the terrible scene here. In this verse, Jeff paints a picture of the emotions and awkwardness of meaningless sex, through the strong contrast of bristling and ugly with comely, a complement of opposite meaning. This opposition and the following falling fruit imagery creates both an awkwardness and a disgust from the fleshy and overripe love described here. Then the line, pretty, bright, and bubbly, is sung once again. Pretty is said strained in a way that sounds like bratty. Clever extra dimension added to the singing here. This implies the immature nature of his lover, and the hollowness of this love. The lover is then referred to as a friend you could need to say comforting things in your ear. Here, a continued criticism is levied through the characterization of her lover as a friend, a title reserved by lovers who cannot face the consequences of their love, yet still wish for some deeper connection, some sex. This is reinforced by her need to hear comforting things in her ear, the illusion of intimacy she does require. Then it is asserted that the friend she could find here, in Jeff, is only his enemy, his shadow. This may allude to the two-headed boy, the lustful and loving character beset by the curse of duality. Here Jeff says he'll crush his lustful enemy with all he owns, though strained again to create multiple interpretations, as it sounds like am. Presumably, this shadow nature of Jeff has drawn him towards this relationship, and his self is directing this diatribe. The line is then delivered where the girl is to hang for her hollow ways, a clear diction of Jeff's message to the girl. Then a haunting line greets us, as the lover is moving her mouth to pull out your miracle for me. The lover is searching for her miracle, a concept that later greets us as the two-headed boy unites at the end of the album. For this girl, Jeff seems to believe her miracle is related to love, yet she is searching for it through hollow waves. Moving mouths is a way of saying making out, reference reinforcing the image of this yearning for a miracle. The next verse details how this girl fits the trailer park girl archetype with a tale of her adulterous father, painted with a typical magnum brush, brought to a particularly sickly and overripe hue in this song, with gems such as flesh-licking ladies. A powerful dreamlike image follows of thunderous sparks from dark stadiums, representing spirit and in Indo-European culture, the father god, now confined to the warrior games found in the stadium. This suggests an absent father hinted at by previous lines, but now shown through symbols. The darkness of the stadium suggests there is an absence, a lack of light coming from this father. Returning to the Indo-European analogy, Zeus, a mythological descendant of the Sky Father god, was known for his infidelity. Then we are told that music and medicine, hollow, addictive distractions, were needed for her comfort that she now seeks in Jeff. She looks for the love she never had as a child, the all too well known daddy issues girl. But in looking for that love, she sabotages herself in a myriad of complex ways, all ghosts who come from the same haunted house. The ugly imagery returns, perhaps indicative of Jeff's disdain for her, as she plucks her silly strings and bends her notes for him, an image seen elsewhere in the album, perhaps alluding to the power of music. The bending of notes, which recurs as a line in other songs, can perhaps be seen in the sound of the singing saw, the characteristic bendy note sound. Bending notes may also refer to the noises, vocalizations of sex. The lines referencing soft and silly music may be self-referential or referencing the music and medicine, the hollow drug party and addiction reference. Rhyming this, the lines ring out with "the movements were beautiful, all in your ovaries," explicitly sexual imagery, both referencing the movement of sex and its fruits. Green fleshy flowers continue the overwrite, sticky imagery of the song and can be seen as a reference to virginity. The image of powerful pistons in sugary sweet machines is one of the most striking and loved in the album, is a strong symbol of the male sexual force. In the industrial age, where men associate with machines and the rational, mechanical thought, and the sweet machines, a brilliant metaphor for empty and unnourishing sex. The smell of semen under the garden can be seen as a metaphor for the fertilization of the feminine garden, the garden where she cares and grows for the future of her children or her partner. That was what she needed when she adored and she believed in Jeff, a clever choice of words, almost as if the narrator were so deified. He was no longer real to her, just a dream, and she simply drunk on her ore. Here, the hollow ways are condemned once again, and her miracle is foretold. Here we leave comely behind. She is not for us. Next, we are haunted as we are told of the death and burial of Anne through beautiful but dark poetry as the song slows down to a crawl. This is the darkest hour of Aeroplane over the sea. Death is upon us, moral and spiritual, for the comely girl and Jeff, and the corporeal death for Anne. Returning to the theme of yearning, Jeff asks if he will be remembered 50 years later, and then returns to a dream image, wishing he could save her in some sort of time machine. Though fairly obvious, this is one of the most beautiful and most meaningful lines in the album. The music it is set in renders this as a point of importance in the song, and the refinement of art here is strong. Centers upon Jeff's yearning to connect with this girl, an idealized femininity, both a yearning to connect with his feeling potential as a man, in the Jungian interpretation, and a real lusting for the girl, and connection with herself. The girl is constantly under threat by dark forces, as shown through the identification of her with Anne. Perhaps the dark and lustful forces within Jeff's psyche, but for Jeff this makes her, his anima, all the more beautiful and all the more whole. Thus he ends this verse, painting what we know are enemies. Dark forces pulling Jeff away from wholeness, the dark forces trying to destroy his dream girl, both real and imagined. The next verse entertains a mysterious dream image of that of conjoined twin girls being eaten by a bear or a stranger in the freezing woods. Twins in mythology are common. There is something auspicious and divine about the presence of twins. The fact that these twins are conjoined connects this with the symbol of the two-headed boy. Perhaps these twins are an anima figure, a feeling potential of the two-headed boy. This verse remains one of the strangest in the album, with its potential for meaning and symbolism, and this attempt to present what is known likely falls short. The lyrics talk of the sisters folding and freezing together, setting an eerie tone for the rest of the verse. Strained lyrics add to this eeriness. Goldoline is an interesting presentation of the name. See that gold is something precious, and the result of alchemical refinement. As an anima figure, Goldoline perhaps symbolizes the refined feeling potential of the two-headed boy. With such an interpretation, the ornate characterization death in some stranger's stomach for some place with sun and spring and green forever clearly shows a symbolic death and rebirth of the spirit of feeling. Considering Jeff's antagonism towards Hollow Love and his apparent acceptance of Anne's death, this verse represents the first light of spiritual and specifically a feeling rebirth following the death of his feeling in the wake of these two dead end relationships on of each head of Goldoline, or the two-headed boy, represent lust and true love. There are other fragments of this forgotten song accessible. A notable one comes from a more recent release of old material named "Oh Sister," which refers to her as Rose Wallace Goldoline, possibly naming both halves of this mythical sister. She is said to move her mouth over anything that is fleshy, free, and flowering. This suggests a dual nature of this creature, much like the two-headed boy. One half of her is closed off and emotional, and the other half can be overcome by lust. Given this corpus of works borrows heavily from each other, it isn't absurd to assume that these works can hold clues to these dream images. This character, being a reflective iteration of the anima to the other two-headed boy, is an interesting proposition. While the anima figure of Anne is seen as pure and divine, her earthliness underscored by her temporary and threatened nature, Goldoline represents a more earthly soul figure, a disfigured compromise of reality, what this track is about. Ghost. Roaring in, reminiscent of 45, this song is one of the few triumphal tracks of the album. The rebirth process is in full swing, and this song represents the integration of the character ghost of Anne. He calls her spirit, a ghost that lives within him, who feels as she flies. This characterization of her as a ghost, a word conjugate with spirit, with anima, is certainly telling. Anne lives within him, and now Jeff acknowledges this. A revealing lyric then follows, "Feel as you fly," showing the ghost's abilities center about her feeling potential, the opposite of Jeff's surface spirit, his ego, who is a man, is home to the inclinations of creation and inquiry. Thunder returns as an image, thunder above the city, possibly indicating the power of the divine over the human. Then Jeff professes his love for this soaring ghost, his anima, that he has been torn away from, and she has been imperiled. Then the symbols of wings and rings are rhymed with each other. Wings represent divinity. The anima often appears as a priestess or mystic to men, representing the instinctive, unknowable part of the psyche. Rings represent wholeness and can be seen as some sort of form of mandala. Through the album, rings are associated with years, in Aeroplane Over the Sea and 45, and completeness, lending further to the mandala concept. Jeff then proclaims that these wings and rings are waiting for her. He is ready to unite with this imperiled ghost, affirming of her divinity and her wholeness after the perils. And Anne's birth year, 1929, calls in this representation of the ghost. She was born in a bottle rocket, imbues her spirit with powerful, ascendant youthful energy. This double symbol of wings and rings return, socketed to her spine, showing the deep connection of these important nature of the ghost and to her spine, the deep core of her existence. The line that which chakras are seated upon in Eastern philosophy, and the symbol of the spine as the core of the corporeal, is seen elsewhere in the album in the beautiful lyrics of Two-Headed Boy. Following this, one of the most powerful symbols of the album follows, as Anne is drenched in milk and holy water falling from the sky, indicating her purity and divinity as it flows from a divine source, further affirming her ghost anima image. Then her immortality is professed, with characteristic rhyme, further professing the divine. It is then declared that she will never be afraid, and the image of the morning paper blowing into a hole where no one can escape. This demonstrates that the ghost figure is now aware of her divine immortality as she no longer fears the irreversibility of death. After a musical interlude, the next verse sings about a girl falling from an apartment building in the sky, with typical magnum flair. This draws from other Neutral Milk Hotel material relating to feminine figures and suicide. See, My Dream Girl Don't Exist. The anima is a so-called archetype of meaning, and these dream images of this anima figure either being hunted down by the Nazis or killing herself suggests that Jeff has lost connection with this archetype and is at risk of losing his soul. This could be from a variety of factors, from a dead romance, as hinted at in O Comely, or a lack of creative connection being salved through his musical work. When this girl dies, however, with incredible imagery, a scene is painted on her splitting the sky, a powerful image which shows that once again the heavens split in her divine presence. Jeff delights in knowing that she will live forever. As such, this dream image has overcome death and is reborn in its pure form, spirit, anima, for now Jeff has reconnected with her. While the story of her impalement remains as a myth to warn what happens when she is abandoned. Now the blowing of the morning paper image repeats to drive this home. As this song comes to an energetic end, the perils of life are transcended, and Jeff's spirit, lit alight with the creative sky spitting fire. Untitled, an instrumental bridge track which wanders us through the aeroplane over the sea soundscape and lets our minds rest before the mysterious transformation that awaits us in Two-Headed Boy Part 2. Tones are reminiscent of a bagpipe march in Anglo-Saxon culture associated with last stands from the bravery of the Scottish rebels. Towards the end, the marching tune fades out into strange tones, and then the stage is set. Two-Headed Boy, Part 2. A numinous start brings us in. Finale of this long and strange journey has a fitting and revelatory ending. The mystery of this beginning instrumental, where the listener is ramped on to by Untitled's broken heroic march, sets the scene of this revelation. The story of the two-headed boy is unfinished, despite the triumph of spirit which took place previously. The lyrics begin with Jeff pleading to his father for love. He does this through proposing that his heart screams for a lover to bring a child to your chest, who would lay as you sleep and love all you have left, and then self-identifying himself with the child just long ago, accompanied by the image of warm and wet sheets, indicating the safety and sanctity of infancy, and his longing for this unfulfilled part of his life. The next verse circles us back to 45, with the episode of the suicidal brother. Jeff calls his dead friend's brother Blister and identifies him as passed by the wings in his spine, an image that identifies the dead or divine through its angelic illusion. He begs him to love a brother of his, though this individual's identity is not clear. Following this imagery of the pair intensely kissing, perhaps symbolic of their need of closer connection. Acts of intimacy in dream images are not necessarily projections of a desire for sexual intimacy, but exaggerated pleas of the unconscious for an improved relationship. The symbol of secret songs wrapped in tight boxes, which sound only at night as you sleep, can be seen to symbolize dreams and the contents of the unconscious, with the relationship between the two needing a new intimacy to survive, and the exchange of ideas crystallized from the unconscious represents a height of intimacy. This potentially also reflects Jeff's inner world, with these figures cognate with the two-headed boy, a dualistic masculine nature, as the association of secret songs with the unconscious is clear here in Jeff's case as he sings his dream images. Overall, a longing for the brother to deeply connect with his dead brother is presented here through the language of symbol, perhaps with the belief that they could have prevented this death. With beautiful lyricism, we return to Jeff and Anne. She is alive and crying in his dreams, clear as day, as the anima figure and ghost. They are sweetly making love with genius lyrical alchemy that melts together like honey. A mandala-like image and the return of the ring motif is painted with the line, "Rings of flowers round your eyes," representing the wholeness of their relationship. He then professes he'll love her for the rest of her life when she is ready, potentially also hinting at this longing. Returning to Blister, the equality of the brothers is proclaimed once again through the line, "one and the same." Perhaps this pair is a constellation of the archetype of the divine twins. This can be seen in parallel to the Roman myth of Castor and Pollux, divine twins, one mortal, one immortal. The immortal Pollux grieved the death of the mortal Castor, and to reunite when they were transformed into the star constellation of Gemini in myth. While this episode is inspired by a real story, the projection of archetypes is a known and well-documented phenomenon. These divine twins are often seen as agents of divine intervention in myths across the world. Their numerology is 2, a number of motion. They are seen as rescuers and healers of mortals. This becomes auspicious later in the song. The song then appears to be narrated by the grieving brother, as the imagery of his head filled with flames rings out, and the verbal gore of his brain falling out through his teeth. The brother then wishes for him to smile again, somehow longing for a miraculous healing, so he can come closer. The image here, a kiss on the cheek. The next verse brings the previous verses together. It represents the final unity for the journey of the two-headed boy, a characterization of Jeff's dual nature and shadow. Begins with an allusion back to part 1, the symbol of breaking. The climactic struggle returns, this time not compared with the orgasm, but the divine. Here, Jeff proclaims that when we break, we wait for our miracle, showing how the innate struggle of life, we always long for some miracle that seems out of our reach, almost divine. The next line, in my opinion, is among the strangest and most beautiful of the album, with "God is a place where some holy spectacle lies," indicating that the fulfillment of such miracles and the resolution of such longings is what divinity is. The line about breaking repeats once again to add depth to this concept, with the addition of, "God is a place you will wait for the rest of your life," indicating that longing itself is divine, giving and life-giving. And this is the revelation imparted upon the two-headed boy through his trials, among so much other beauty and depth born of this longing. The creative spirit and art that make up this great album, a drop of the divine channeled by longing. All of the previous episodes in this song lead up to this, and at this climax, we break and we see who God is oh so clearly. The way is the goal, the longing is the journey. Finally, Jeff concludes this song addressing the fragile and deformed inner character of the two-headed boy. He calmly but passionately reassures him that she is all he could need, and that she'd feed him tomatoes and radio wire, a brilliant rhyme and image. The tomato, a red fruit full of fertility, vitality, and passion, and the copper wire, a representation of the radio, a semi-divine symbol found elsewhere in Jeff's dream worlds, carrying the voices from the heavens. Then Jeff promises that Anne will retire to sheets safe and clean, presenting that she will never be imperiled like she was in Auschwitz. The final line, though, is perhaps one of the most mysterious. Jeff asks the boy not to hate her when she gets up to leave. Perhaps this is a projection of the hope that the boy has of meeting her in waking life, rather than realizing she is a part of his soul. Or perhaps this album is a song dedicated to Anne, performed for her once Jeff finally is united with her, as the next sound we hear is someone, perhaps in a final act sealing a tragedy, getting up to leave.